Welcome, everybody, to a special post-game edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, here at MetLife Stadium. And on a day when I promised you it was not going to be the greatest game ever played between the Giants and the Colts, harkening back to 1958 NFL Championship, won by the Colts, and known forever as the greatest game ever played. Well, the New York Giants went out here and, it's funny. Malik Neighbors finished his post-game press conference wearing like these big brown suede boots. They almost look like clown shoes. And he laughed and said, he kind of wished it snowed. Well, it didn't snow, but hell froze over. And I wrote that in my column on NorthJersey.com that just posted a little while ago, so make sure you check that out. Your New York Giants have basically turned their world upside down. 45 points today and a win over the Indianapolis Colts. If you had just showed up at MetLife Stadium and not known the difference and what was at stake, you would have thought the Colts were near the bottom of the draft, or the top of the draft, if you will, and that the Giants were still in contention for the playoffs. Obviously, roles were reversed. The Colts were the 7-8 team, but still with an outside shot at qualifying for the playoffs, and the Giants were in control of the number one pick in the NFL draft. Well, that's no more. 4 touchdown passes for Drew Lock. What are we talking about? Giants need a quarterback. They got Drew Lock here, no problem. Another rushing touchdown. The irony of that is that I believe, and I should have looked it up beforehand, when we had the Andrew Thomas Bowl back in 2019, and then we went into the 2020 draft, and I laugh saying that it's the Andrew Thomas Bowl because we all know it was the Chase Young Bowl, and the Giants won that game. I believe Daniel Jones had 5 touchdowns that day to beat Washington, and Washington ended up claiming the number 2 overall pick. They took Chase Young. The Giants ended up with 4, and they took Andrew Thomas. Well, fast forward to today, and I'm not sure anybody saw that kind of performance for the New York Giants. Let's handle it this way. Right now, we've got about, 3 minutes left to go in Cleveland. That's a big game for the Giants and their draft order. If Cleveland loses, which they are down 4:30 left to go in that game against the Dolphins. The Dolphins are winning 13-3, so it sure looks like the Browns are going to lose that game. That would allow the Browns to leapfrog the Giants as well. So it will be New England 1, Tennessee 2, Cleveland 3, and the Giants have gone from 1 to 4 in Tankathon for the draft for next April. My producer Paul Wood tells me it was 352 for Daniel Jones, yardage, and 5 touchdowns. The overtime winner, I believe, to Caden Smith at that night. And then Caden Smith ended up having a concussion the following year and was never the same player, unfortunately. He was really a promising young player that the Giants had. So what's in the tank? Where does the team need to be? Well, here's what you need to know. Number one, let's talk present, and then we'll talk future. For the present, this is a big win just emotionally for the Giants. Does it change anything? Maybe a little bit. John Mara and Steve Tisch still are at least a week away from sitting down and truly deciding what's going to happen with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. I, again, do not believe that they should make a change. I, yes, believe that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll still should come back. It's not about today. I've been consistent since I wrote it the day after Thanksgiving that I think that this regime needs an opportunity to turn the corner. Okay? Now, where they're at, I think Brian Daboll, after the game today, in his press conference, where, let's be honest, he's still tight-lipped. He's not saying anything in his post-game presser. Whether he admits it or not, I think he's very conscious not only of what the locker room hears him say about his players in a 10-game losing streak, which is now over, but I think Brian Daboll letting it slip a little bit. Essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, you see when you get good quarterback play, you can win every game in this league. They got that from Drew Lock today. They're not going to get that consistently from Drew Lock. He is who he is. They're not going to get that from Tim Boyle or Tommy DeVito. They're just not. The reality is the Giants are hammering home the idea that they have to get a quarterback. They have to draft a quarterback. So what happens? Now they move from 1 to 4. They could have controlled their destiny. But had they finished out this season with 2 losses, there's no telling if Brian Daboll is back as head coach. There's no telling if Joe Schoen is back. And I know there are fans here who want them all out and want to clean house again. And I understand it. Look, there was a chance that they made NFL history today, finishing 0-9, just the second winless season at home for the Giants in the history of this franchise, which, in case you didn't notice, it's 100 seasons. That may have been around a little bit. Maybe that little logo on Twitter might remind you every once and again that it's the 100th anniversary. But the fact is this team came out here today and made you think for 1 week, man, where was this? Now, look, the Colts defense was terrible. But when you have a player like Malik Neighbors to make the plays that he made today, you stand up, sit up a little bit, and you go, you know what? We got a player. Now, it certainly doesn't help that at the same time the Giants are playing, Saquon Barkley, after being completely held in check for a half in Philly, ends up going over 2,000 yards for the season for today. So before I forget that, and I'll get this, we have some questions from the K-12 tailgate. We'll get to those. Before I forget, next week, the original schedule, everything is TBD for Sunday. All along with the Giants eliminated, we believe that it was going to be Philly and the Giants in Philly at the Link at 1 o'clock on Sunday. Hearing now that that game is in play for Saturday, potentially a Saturday night game. Now, I don't think the NFL will go that route, but it is possible. So as we're recording this show, keep that in mind that tonight when you're watching Sunday Night Football, that game may get shifted to Saturday. Why? Well, number one, the Eagles are potentially still in the hunt for the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. If Minnesota beats Green Bay, and they're whipping up on Green Bay right now, I believe that Philly loses out, then there's nothing to play for. So why would they put that game in primetime? Well, Saquon Barkley might be going for Eric Dickerson's record against his old team. It's very unlikely that Saquon is playing. I can't imagine that they're going to play him just for the record. He said as much after the game. But could the networks move that game around? I still think we're going to get that Philly-Giants game at 1 o'clock on Sunday, but you got to keep that in mind. It is a possibility. The Giants were essentially told by the NFL, hey, just keep that in mind. You may get switched to Saturday. So we'll see how that works out. And don't forget, that also plays into the playoffs. So if they believe the Eagles are going to open their playoff run on Saturday, then they might put that Giants-Eagles game on Saturday just because. So it might not have anything to do with the parameters involved in the game. It may be wanting to put the Eagles on that Saturday schedule for the first round of the playoffs. So keep that in mind as a possibility for next weekend. So anyway, let's get back to this game today. I mean, look, there's not much more you can say. The players are not going to tank. They're not. And I know it's hard to believe that in the last 10 losses that this team wasn't trying to lose, but they truly were trying to win. And they just couldn't win. Today, they put it all together. offensively. They ran into the right team at the right time. The Colts were not good today. Even though Joe Flacco was throwing the pill around in the second half, it's still – it was a lot about the team that they were facing today. Malik Neighbors looked as healthy as he has all season. The 59-yard touchdown, which was the second one, the first touchdown in which he broke a 3rd and 14 wide receiver screen to the house. It's a tough pill to swallow. And I agree with a lot of Giants fans right now that are very frustrated and very upset that you had control of the number 1 overall pick, and now you don't. And you're probably going to end up, like I said, 4th if you lose to Philly next week. I'm not sure if any other teams can lose and you can bump up, but we'll see. We'll see what happens in the final week. So that's where we're at. Let's get to some questions from K12. We'll go first. Jay Kranjak, if one of the top 2 QBs aren't available when the Giants draft, what should they do? Well, look, Jay, the reality is that, back in 2004, the Giants were picking 4th, and they identified a quarterback, and they wanted Eli Manning, and Eli Manning forced his way out of San Diego and wanted to come to New York, and they were able to consummate the trade. Now, look, you don't want to give up assets. If you're Joe Shane and he is back as general manager, if I believe should happen, and if it certainly appears that way, you don't want to give up assets, but you do what you have to do to get your franchise quarterback. They didn't do it this year because they identified the players that they wanted, the quarterbacks that they wanted, and those teams were not going to trade. Chicago wasn't trading Caleb Williams, and the Giants really wanted Jaden Daniels, but Washington was not trading him. And then New England didn't want to trade out with Drake May. So the Giants identified, and they considered trading, but the path to that wasn't there. Will it be there for this one? Well, now you have to start looking at which teams need quarterbacks. New England, no, they're not drafting a quarterback. They have Drake May. So if they're sitting at 1, sure, it's not going to be fun to have to trade to get to number 1, but you're at number 4 if you're the Giants. So do what you got to do to get up to number 1 and get your pick of the quarterback. Tennessee, will they look for a quarterback? Most likely. I would think they will. Cleveland, are they looking for a quarterback? Not sure. Deshaun Watson is now under a restructured contract for next year, so we'll see what the Browns are doing. And then you have the Giants. And then we'll see what next week poses. Where are they at? Who's playing who on the final week? And what do you have in terms of who needs to win, who needs to lose in order to get there? But if the top 2 quarterbacks are not available, well, then I think the Giants will either take one of the offensive linemen from LSU. Maybe they take Travis Hunter if he's sitting there. Maybe you go Will Johnson from Michigan. Wouldn't that be interesting to take a guy coached by Wink Martindale, although he's been banged up all year? So Wink really didn't coach Will Johnson that much, but he may be the top corner in the draft. And maybe there's a trade to be had. Or maybe you move a couple spots down and maybe you fall in love with Jalen Milroe, and that's who you want as quarterback. There are a lot of different things at play right now that has to play out throughout the evaluation period in the draft. You have to see where teams are sitting next week and go from there. But thanks, Jay. Appreciate that question. All right. Matt Sherhall asks, if the Giants get the number 1 pick, what type of value do you think they can get for the pick if they move back? Really depends on what player is on the board. I don't know necessarily if there are going to be a lot of teams moving up to try to get a Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. I don't know. And as I just mentioned, 2 of the 3 teams ahead of the Giants probably have their quarterback for next year. So that may give the Giants a little leeway to try to get up and get that quarterback. But moving back, it's kind of hard to determine that right now because you don't know what's going to be available in front of you. But I'm not sure what value is going to be there for teams to move up into that spot, and if it's worth it for the Giants to move back. We have to wait and see, but I do appreciate that question. Let's see. Do I think the Giants will go for Cousins, trade back, and stockpile picks? Andrew Kelly. You know what? Look, I've watched Kirk Cousins this year. I am not looking to pay Kirk Cousins a ton. Maybe if he turns into a Russell Wilson situation and most of his salary is being paid by the Falcons, maybe then I'll consider it. But I'm not sold on Kirk Cousins being a bridge quarterback for this team. I don't know about stockpiling picks, and like I said to Matt, I don't know what's going to be available, so we have to see what that market looks like. Anthony Maffey wants to know, will the Giants look for a replacement for JMS in free agency or the draft? It's a good question. JMS has not had a good season yet again, and I think it wouldn't surprise me to see if they look for a veteran in free agency, maybe not a star, but somebody who can come in and challenge him in that spot. But his development has been hurt by injuries, and he just has not gotten to the point where I don't know if he's sturdy enough in there. I think he gets pushed around a little bit, and he's certainly not the player that they thought they were drafting and developing in year one. Could that change? We'll see. But it's a good question. JMS and center on this line is definitely a spot where I think the Giants will be looking to upgrade and to continue to develop John Michael Schmitz if that transpires. And then the last question is from the K-12 chef, and I'm told there is a reason he is the K-12 chef. So this is an interesting one, and I don't have an answer to it, but it's definitely understandable as to why it's on fans' minds as the home season finishes up here. With the growing salaries, should the Giants fans expect a ticket price increase despite the horrendous performance this year? Look, it's hard for me to think that John Mara and Steve Tisch would have the gall to raise ticket prices for next year. And, it's part of being a season ticket holder. It really is. And a lot of you guys and gals who have season ticket memberships and have PSLs that you can't sell, it's not a good situation. With the secondary market, you would have never anticipated the secondary market would be what it is right now, not for a losing team. So I don't know what they're going to do. But let me put it this way. They know the fan base is frustrated. They know they did not put out a great product, regardless of what happened in this home finale today. Yes, they avoided history, the wrong kind of history. Yes, they're 3-13. They won a game at home. Now nobody's going to remember the idea that they went 1-8 at home. I felt as though the 0-9 didn't matter much, but it's still there as a possibility, and now it's not. It's 1-8. I'd have a hard time thinking that they're going to sell, bringing everybody back, drafting a quarterback, and then raising ticket prices. I think they have to bite the bullet this year and say, you know what, we're not going to raise ticket prices, and we are going to improve our product. And that's just the way it is. I mean, money is being raised in other avenues. They are making money here with the events at MetLife Stadium, with the World Cup coming in 2026. Don't do this to your fan base. You're probably going to lose a segment of your fan base that have season ticket renewals and stuff like that. You're probably not going to have people jumping for your season ticket memberships. I would say, Chef, I can't guarantee it, but I'd be very surprised if they raise ticket prices this year. That'd be some gall to do that off of this product that you put out there for these fans for this season. So again, I don't have the books. I know NFL teams are doing great for themselves, so it's not like they're penny pinching. But I don't know what the memberships look like as far as this product right now for the Giants and what their home games are. You only have 8 next year. The following year is 9, and I believe that's the year that they'll probably go back to Germany, maybe take one of those and be the home team in Germany. But that's just a guess for 2026. But we'll have to see what happens. So I appreciate all the questions from our guy Paul's tailgate at K12. Again, anybody, feel free to send in questions every week, whether it's for our episode during the week or our podcast that's post-game. You can email me. You can reach out to me on Twitter at @Art_Stapleton. My email is stapleton@northjersey.com, and I'll always look to engage with those who show me professional and personal respect. I will try, and I promise to do the same. So that's where we're at. We got one game left down in Philly where the Giants have not won since 2013. Like I said, right now the game is over in Cleveland. Miami wins, so the Giants are now picking 4th in the Tankathon draft order. They go from 1st to 4th. Is it still possible that they get a quarterback? Yes. Let's see how next week plays out, and we go from there. But I completely understand why the fan base feels the way it does right now. I'm sure some in the Giants organization feel that way. But just the reality, I'll leave you with this. Caught up to John Mara in the hallway downstairs, and only fair that after losses, everyone wants to know what John Mara's thinking. Myself and Ryan Dunleavy from the New York Post were approaching John, caught up to him, and in stride essentially asked, it's only fair, how are you feeling after a win today? And John said, Happy New Year, appreciate it. And then made a joke to Ryan about how if only you were trying to be fair all the time, and laughed it off and just kind of got it. So you can tell, this was not a we're back situation for John Mara. Definitely a sense of relief for the Giants to not have those, situations where, as we've laid out, all the losing, all the frustration, but that's kind of where we're at right now. So the Giants are now 4th. Let's not forget, the last time they got a franchise quarterback that actually won here, they picked 4th, and they made the trade for Eli Manning. So maybe there's a little symmetry to that as well moving forward. And I'll say this, and I'll say it again. Keep Shane, keep Dable, draft Shador or Cam, and the mood here will be a lot different next year. I don't know about the wins. I can't prove that. I can't guarantee that, and neither can they. But I think the quarterback changes everything. And if you can get a young quarterback and hit on it, look at Washington, look at Houston. I know C.J. Stroud's going through a rough patch right now, but you can change an organization by building around the quarterback, but by first and foremost, get that quarterback. And I think the Giants will end up doing that. Just a note on Saturday, the speculation of the Shador Sanders cleats, the red and blue, they were in fact real. He did not wear them. He had them custom made. So Giants cleats, nice message, symbolism for him. I know the jokes about how Shador played. That BYU team was pretty good. And I made the joke about how, it was almost like Apollo Creed versus Ivan Drago in Rocky IV. Creed showed up for an exhibition, and Drago basically killed him in the ring. And nobody was, thankfully, there was no physical harm on Saturday night. But at the Alamo Bowl, boy, I think Colorado showed up thinking it was a little bit of an exhibition, and BYU just kind of ran them all over the field. But Giants had representation at both games. Joe Shane and Tim McDonald, Director of Player Personnel, yes, John Mara's nephew, were at Orlando for Cam Ward. I wouldn't read too much into that. I think they just wanted to be on site for Cam Ward. And then Brandon Brown, Dennis Hickey, and Jesse Armstead were all at the Alamo Bowl for Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, if you want to believe that one. So that's where we're at. We'll see about this week, but I will leave you with what John Mara said. Happy New Year from all of us at All In, and the Giants get a win. Who knew? But like CM Punk said when he returned to WWE, hell froze over. Hell froze over today. There's no snow. It was 55 degrees, but the Giants got a win. And now you've got to wonder where they land. Next week becomes intriguing. And if they finish 3-14, then we'll see where they are in the draft and move forward from there. So appreciate it. For Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. Thanks for being all in. We'll see if we're going to have a show this week or if we're just going to wrap it up in Philly post-game, and then we'll move on to the offseason. And you know, All In cranks during the offseason. We'll have the combine. We'll have the owners' meetings. Will we have a coaching change? Will we have a new GM? We're going to find out all of that. It's a big offseason for the New York Giants. We will be all in as usual. Again, hope everyone had a happy holiday. Happy and a healthy new year to everyone, and we'll be back soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.